Hey guys, Nate here. I want to talk really quickly about a new study that was done by Facebook recently. It does have a little bit on ad campaigns, so I want to break that really down quick for you, just so we can get a better understanding of how the ad campaigns actually work. Now, this study has to do with reach and it has to do with frequency. If you don't know what reach is the amount of people that your campaign or your ad reaches. It's very simple, very self-explanatory. Frequency is the amount of times it's actually put in front of that person. They actually see it, they recognize that there is intent there. That is what frequency is, to make it different from impressions. Now, both of these are important metrics. I use them all the time. Make sure that you use them. They're important metrics. I think that people don't use frequency as much as they should, but it is something that we should definitely be aware of, how many times our ads are being shown in front of people and the impact that actually has. And it's going to be different top of funnel to bottom of funnel. We're going to talk about that. Let's dive into what Facebook actually has to say. Now, frequency in terms of Facebook, they don't have any specific baseline number to what that actually has to be. And another study done by Facebook, they did analyze that the more times that it's put in front of somebody, or in terms of frequency, the more likely they are to basically have a different behavioral intent. It's going to change their behavior, typically in regards on intent to buy or to purchase. Makes total sense. You think about somebody like a window shopper, right? When somebody walks by a window, they're looking, they see something, they might want it, but they'll say, I don't know. They walk by it again. Now they're thinking something different. Now they're like, okay, I remember seeing that and I did kind of want it, but what else is there about it that I need to know or something before I buy it, right? People start having different, things going through their head. It changes their behavior. It's exactly what this kind of shows here. Makes total sense. Now, this study is more about what does it actually mean? Where's the point that there's actually diminishing returns on how many times you actually send an ad to someone, and what impacts this? Is it creatives? Is it the audience? What does this actually come down to? We're going to break that down really quick. Now, to go through the study, really simple. Facebook analyzed 2,439 brand lift campaigns. Now, if you don't know what this is, it's basically Facebook's way of polling or surveying people on campaigns. So basically they take, like a campaign I think you can use your campaigns. I've never done this, but basically they take a campaign that is like the test group and they have a control group. They run these against each other in line with like brand awareness and to get as much reach as possible to see which one actually performs the best. And so they did this and they basically did a measure of the desired response rate, and they measured positive responses to the survey polls on ad recall and action intent. And this is done between 4 and 48 hours of somebody's last impression, except if they did not log in between that time. Makes perfect sense. If you think about it, 48 hours, that's a pretty decent amount of time, typically even with something like sales calls, right? Typically don't recommend that they book them out 4 days because people tend to forget there's no recall there. So 48 hours is typically probably a good time to see what's the actual recall and intent of that person that is coming through that ad. Now, what they found, I'm going to pull up a chart here really quick. We'll look at the chart. What they did find is that they buy greater impressions, typically drive greater results, make perfect sense, but it does tend to trail off over time. Looking at this first chart here, this tends to be around 5 to 6 impressions. You do see that there's not that continual growth in that desired response rate. It does tend to kind of trail off a little bit, and that's where we see that's probably the best point to which you can put an ad in front of someone in regards to impressions. Now, there was a second chart done as well, and this is where the really big impact to understand how this actually works and why this makes sense and what we can do about it comes into play. They also did campaigns where they tested, high engagement campaigns to low engagement campaigns. Now, if we look at this chart here, it's very, very clear that the high engagement campaigns always outperform even the medium and low campaigns. Look at how big the divide is between high, mid, and low, even just between high and mid. Look at that divide there and how much difference that makes. It's crazy to see that. Now we're looking kind of towards around the same amount of impressions, but the response rate is so much better. This is clear-cut proof that creatives impact they have a huge impact on the actual effectiveness of ads. What people don't actually understand is that engagement on creatives can determine the longevity of an ad and how quickly it actually takes for that ad to plateau. And in terms of performance, right? Because this is something that Facebook cares about. They care about user experience. They care about customer experience. They want people on their platform to feel good and have high engagement. If people are commenting on your ad, a metric that we use on ads a lot is share to like ratio. Really, really big deal to be able to see the actual engagement, because that's a really good engagement metric, but also looking at comments on that ad. They want that for the people on their platform. If your ad is just kind of out getting in people's way and nothing's really happening with it, that's why it turns down really quickly. And if you stop getting comments and you stop getting likes and you stop getting shares, again, that tells Facebook, well, it's kind of probably going downhill now. So this is why it is so important to not only focus on good ads, but and good copy, but also look at how do we get people to actually engage with this ad and have some engagement. It's important to also do this while continually testing more creatives. You don't want to just sit with the same creatives forever, because even really good, high engagement ads eventually are going to plateau off a little bit. So really important to keep that continual testing going. I think it's going to take them longer to plateau. It's going to produce greater results. It's very obvious given the response right here. Now, in terms of frequency in our agency, typically we're looking for a frequency at the top of funnel being no more than 2, right? And it depends on the audience here. We are mainly e-commerce. So when it comes down to e-com, you're typically looking at audiences of 1.3 to 5 million, maybe some higher depending on the ad budget. You might be even higher than that. And so at the end of the day, you either have a bad audience if you're going really, really high like that on an e-com store, or you're putting way too much budget in a very small audience that it's just blasting through them. More localized campaigns, it might make sense because the audiences aren't very big. It might be really easy to go through those. But on an e-com, especially when you're in the millions, depending on your ad spend, again, this is why it's different for each person. But the reason being is because we want to have that retargeting structure set up, right? You don't want everyone being shown the exact same ad over and over on the top of funnel. And you might even be able to use the same ad on the middle of funnel, but at the same time, it's important to set up that retargeting structure to be able to let people, learn more about you and to actually put them through a natural flow that converts them and changes their buyer behavior. Again, think of a window shopper. This is the exact same concept. You're bringing them back. You're showing them something else that maybe they weren't aware of before. The middle and bottom of funnel can typically have different levels of frequencies. Some might be high, some might be low. It depends on your ad budget, but you're going to see probably a higher frequency in those audiences than you are in the top of funnel for most cases in big audiences or even mid-size audience. Some people define big audiences as like an 80 million person audience, but relatively good sized audiences are 1.3 to 5 million people depending on your ad spend. I mean, if you have a $1 million a month ad spend, well, then a 20 to 30 million person audience probably isn't going to be that big of a deal. But if you're somebody starting off low budget, the 5 to 10,000 per month range, a 1.3 to 5 million person audience is going to be great. And so you want to keep that frequency at the top of funnel pretty low, but then pull them through a retargeting structure to actually convert them to buy and actually get them through a natural flow to that add to cart, to that initiate checkout, and eventually to that purchase. This is going to be different on how you test it, whether you're testing and retargeting for video views, 14 days, 15, 20, 30 days, depending on how you're testing that is how you're going to see that frequency. It just depends on how big that audience actually gets from your ad spend. Now, for me, I tell this to people all the time. This is clear proof right here that creatives have a huge impact on the actual performance of the account. It's probably top 3, honestly, in my top 3. The first one being the offer. The offer, obviously, you heard me talk about this before if you've watched my videos, super important. And then when it comes down to it, the creatives are going to be important as well. I know people that have had just crap websites that are horrible that have an amazing, so hot offer, and then they have an amazing ad that gets them excited, takes them to a kind of crappy website, but the website does good enough. Not everybody needs a website that looks like Apple, right? That has all the fancy, bells and whistles coming down it and whatnot. But when it comes down to it, this offer and this creative was so good, it was able to convert that person in. So two very important things. Make sure you're watching your frequency. Make sure that you're continually testing new ads, and make sure that you're monitoring the actual engagement on those ads, making sure you're keeping those ads and trying to encourage people to engage with you. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you found value in it, please make sure that you like and subscribe down below. Helps me out so much. Helps me out with the YouTube algorithm, And I would just love it if you keep on checking out my stuff so I can keep on making stuff for you. Thank you guys so much. Until next time.